and welcome to Right Hearted with me, Stuart Wakefield, and I'm delighted to have with me today writer, playwright, positive deviant. Jack Thorne described her as daringly dangerous, and The Guardian said she had great uninhibited writing. Anita, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to see you.
And it's good to see you as well. Actually, we haven't met in person since 2016.
That's a fair while now, isn't it?
Yes,
5.
yes. So I met Anita. We were on, we did the same master's degree in professional writing. And I'm conscious we went in very different directions in our writing. So Anita, give us a kind of a recap of how you came to be a writer and a playwright.
What do you mean? Like, when did I start writing from?
Yeah.
Ever,
you know,
I mean, like for the first time.
Yeah, well, you were like as a child, did you always want to be a writer? Did you kind of fall into it?
I really have a strong memory of being like in primary school, and you know, they give you out those questionnaires like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember really strongly like writing down that I wanted to be an author then, and I think I probably must have been like 9. But and I just loved reading. I read all the time, and I thought I would want to be a novel writer, writing novels. And I guess I kind of thought that was a secret that I wasn't supposed to tell anybody, because the messages are like quite often like, you know, it's not a real job, or you know, it's not particularly practical. But yeah, I remember from being really young wanting to be an author, but I think mainly I was inspired by the novels that I used to just read books all the time.
Okay, and did you read wide, or do you have like a particular genre that you kind of got into?
I think I read quite broadly. I mean, obviously, like at primary school, I was like, it was pretty minimal, I suppose. I really liked Enid Blyton.
Okay.
And but no, I just consumed anything I could get my hands on. And as a teenager, I mean, my mum always had a book around, but it tended to be quite sort of historical romance or Catherine Cookson or something like that. So I'd read all her books, but as a teenager I was really drawn to activist books, and autobiographies of people who had overcome difficulties or changed the world in some way.
So you mentioned that, you know, you were getting messages around the kind of, that wasn't a real job. So you're 9, you've written author as what do you want to be when you grow up, and so was that when you started receiving those messages, or was it kind of something you just soaked in socially?
I didn't tell anybody really, and though I mean that was just a questionnaire at school. It wasn't really discussed, you know. It wasn't like an open conversation, and I don't remember really talking about it with other people, but I think it is quite broad, just quite broadly it happens at school, or it's like a magical thing being a writer or an artist, you know. It's like, oh, that poor artist thing. Or one of my family I spoke to a few years ago, and they were like, what are you doing? It was around the MA time, and I was like, oh, I'm a writer and I work with you know, people in the community. And they just said, oh, you're still working with the great unwashed, then you want to stay poor for the rest of your life? It's like, no, that's not my aim. But you know, I think it's important to do stuff that you love.
Yes, I agree. So, you know, your kind of nebulous, ephemeral goal is to become an author. How did that sort of change over time?
Well, I was quite introverted at school, and being young, I was quite shy, and I mean, I always loved books and reading and English and, you know, stuff in that way, but but my family never went to the theatre, or particularly they did like pantomimes and stuff. But it wasn't really a thing. And then when I was at secondary school, and I did theatre, and I just absolutely loved it. I loved it. And just being different people and trying on different personas or worlds, or just inhabiting those stories. I absolutely loved it. And I guess from there, that's what I did then at A level, and then went on to uni and did that. I mean, with quite a big gap in between those things, but yeah, I just love performing and bringing those stories to life, and it really helped me sort of gain confidence and be in the world as a person.
Okay. And would you say your style, so obviously, you know, when I look at you, you know, you do a lot of community work. You know, you seem that thread of activism seems to, you know, be in your writing as well. So when you started your theatre course, were you acting, or you got to do some writing there?
I mean, at college, I was like quite rebellious. Wasn't particularly, you know, I mean, I liked the course, but that wasn't my I liked sex and drugs, basically. I was having a nice time with that, so the course wasn't my favorite thing. But when I did an HND in community arts, and so that was my theatre experience at uni, and that was very much combining the two, because I'd gone traveling after my A levels. I was like, I really didn't want to be in education anymore. I just found it really stifling, and it didn't really teach me what I wanted to do. And I was getting more and more kicking against the system, really, and getting into situations that weren't good for me, for my mental health, or just good for me generally. I wasn't getting what I needed. So I went traveling for a fair while. And then when I came back to England, I came back to do that course because I needed a sense of purpose. And that combined the two things, so quite deliberately. So I'd spend some time developing my own writing. I wrote a one-woman show and wrote and performed it. And then as part of doing that, I did a placement with Actor Community Theatre, and then ended up working for them for 18 years. So
So you mentioned earlier that you said that what you wanted from education you weren't getting. What was that tension?
I felt like it was really tame, and like, I mean, and I guess that's still how I feel about theatres and sort of institutions now. Like I don't particularly like studying Shakespeare or like stories that have been told over and over and over again. I'm really interested in what's happening now, and how people are changing the world now, and how as a writer I can like write stories that that marginalized people can see themselves in, because I really think I mean, I guess like lots of people, I just don't really feel seen as a person in mainstream stories. And I guess unconsciously as a teenager, I felt that without properly knowing that. That's why I became so rebellious, I suppose. Just like not feeling seen is well, it's just not great. It's just not great, is it? So I've forgotten your question.
No. I mean, I was just, we were talking about, you know, what you weren't getting from education and
I just felt, what I wasn't getting from education. I just don't really like being passive, particularly. Like I don't like that sort of thing of being told, and then as a student you receive. I think like having a interaction, like I mean, I've got a lot of teenagers in my life now, and I feel like I strive to hold a place where we interact, rather than I'm just giving them how the world is. And surely as people we're evolving all the time, and the world is evolving, and that's part of giving and receiving and the learning. And I just didn't feel like that happened so much in education. I mean, there was a couple of like odd experiences or teachers or whatever where I felt like it was a genuine exchange, but there's a lot of sitting down and being still and doing what you're told, which I don't do well with.
So how does that translate into how you write?
Well, I guess I'm writing from, well, my last play that I wrote was about, or is about, a group of teenagers who are kicking against current restrictions in their lives in secondary school. And there's some characters that are sort of just redoing the cycle of what's happening, and then there's a couple of characters who are breaking out from that. The two main characters are lesbians, and there's not many plays where people who are gay or lesbians actually have a positive end and don't die or traumatized or kill themselves. So I'm trying to get, like, offering a story which is acknowledging all the difficult things that are happening in the world and for teenagers, but offering a different outcome. I think that it really does affect people's mental health, and like to be able to see an actual difference that can be received positively.
I feel bad now because I'm working on a short story where one of the guys dies.
You've written quite a lot where that doesn't happen though, haven't you?
I think like ratio wise, if I keep writing novels with a happy ever after, which is kind of what I want to do, I could drop the odd, kill your gaze,
drop the odd death in. I think that's okay. It's just when all the stories are trauma, death, trauma. It's like, oh my god, I obviously understand that that's a lot of people's experience, and it's important to be honest about that. But when that's all you see in mainstream media, on TV and theatre and stories, like where is the opportunity to grow? Otherwise that's just presenting a world that's static, and I think that's really hard. And there's a really good quote which I probably am not going to be able to remember properly right now, but about seeing yourself, something about monsters in the mirror, can't remember. I'll remember it when we've stopped talking.
It's always the way. So you said you had a lot of teenagers in your life at the moment. Is that through the community groups that you work with?
Well, I am a single parent for 2 teenagers, so they are with me most of the time, and they have friends, and but also I work for the youth offending service, so I have there's quite a lot of teenagers there too. And I'm working for Theatre Royal Plymouth at the moment, and I'm doing a project with them where it's an intergenerational project where I'm speaking to teenagers and elders, and they're swapping their opinions and thoughts about what rules need to be followed and what rules need to be broken. So to give me material to write a play.
Good. Because I think that there's always that question where people will say to a writer, where do you get your ideas? And I think it's just being open and being listening, and actually probably being a bit nosy,
being really nosy.
So it sounds like your writing has kind of evolved from you said, like, you wanted to be seen. It sounds like that has kind of matured or evolved into wanting other marginalized people to be seen. Is that fair?
I mean, I felt like by doing the MA 5 years ago,
scary.
I feel like I found my voice then, because I'd done 20 years of working in community theatre and community arts, so I was well versed in supporting other people to find their voices. And I feel by doing the MA, I really made space and time to find my own voice. And as I've got stronger within that, I guess I'm able to hold a space to hear people again without losing myself. I'm like I was previously really good at just not existing whilst facilitating people. I mean, obviously I'm influencing how I'm putting stories together when I'm doing that, but it's very different being aware of my own voice and holding a space for other people. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to talk to you. You said something about you found education quite passive. how do you think, so, like reading a book or watching a film, what is it about theatre for you that has, or rather doesn't have, that passivity?
I think it can do. I think theatre can be very passive. You have the stage and then the audience, and it can be very much like that. Yeah. But what interests me is the blur of the real and the imagined, and evoking senses and actually provoking reactions from an audience. So it's not just a sit back and observe situation. Like my last play was, well, it was programmed to be on at Bristol Old Vic as part of the Bristol Rep season, but actually just before the but just before COVID, so it ended up being on Zoom. But my plan was that the main action is a story on the stage, obviously is 5 characters, but there would also be between 15 and 20 young men in the audience doing ensemble movement, and they would have phones with which they would be looking at, and that would be informing what's happening on the stage. And so that would be and I wouldn't necessarily, like, the audience would walk into that without, I mean, some people would know if they'd read a leaflet, I guess, but they would, they would be affected in a way, because they would be surrounded by young men in like hoodies and, on their phones. That's going to start a certain edginess happening, I think. And so I'm interested in how worlds blend, and making theatre more of a immersive experience rather than I mean, obviously any kind of thing is like passive to a level, but I think it's different when you're just sitting watching something like TV, and when your senses are activated, or when there's a deliberate emotion provoked.
And I think there's something in there about kind of shared experience as well.
Exactly.
I mean, I used to be in the theatre up until 2003, and it was really interesting. So, like, a Friday night audience would be quite different to a Saturday night audience, and I found it interesting how people's energy would feed off other people. So sometimes a Saturday audience would start quiet, and then you get a couple of chucklers or somebody with belly laughs, and suddenly it lifts the whole mood. And you don't really get that with a novel. I guess you get it to a degree, if you're in a cinema, but also there's that rift between the actors and the audience as well. How are you? Okay, so I think what I'm getting at is, as a writer, you seem much more involved as a writer than if somebody wrote a play 5 years ago and then it gets put on somewhere else. They're kind of not really going to be around. So for you, I mean, do you rewrite shows as the performances progress?
I have, I mean, I am doing at the moment. And also there's elements of the things that I'm writing where I would want the main, like the protagonist, the actress who's playing the protagonist, to be able to improvise at points. So there's some points where she would directly address the audience, so they're dropping out of the world and coming into the present. And so that would be different depending on who's there. And I think there's something really important about acknowledging what's actually happening in a room. And if someone had dropped something, or someone, I don't know, done something, then I would want the actors to be able to acknowledge that and just be in their bodies enough. Because then I think if a performer is connected to their breath and connected to the room, then the audience can be more present with what's happening. If it's too much in the head, then that's when things, become a more passive or disconnected experience, I think.
Although it can be quite frightening for an actor to acknowledge somebody in the audience and break that fourth wall, and it can be petrifying for somebody in the audience to be singled out by an actor. How, I mean, how do you kind of work through that with actors? Because it's one thing in rehearsals when you've got everything taped out on the floor, but another thing when you've got 60, 70 people looking at you.
Well, like the person, the woman who is performing the play I've been talking about, Buzzing, we just did an extract at Salisbury Theatre, and she's just brilliant at it.
Okay.
She's like, I'd need a performer, like the role I've written for that show, I'd need a performer who would thrive off that. And I think it's okay for an audience to feel scared sometimes. I think there's a difference between participatory theatre, where you're actually getting an audience member to come up, or you're grilling them or something, or there's an expectation of joining in, and I wouldn't necessarily expect that unless that happened naturally, because I think that can be quite shutting down. Although some performers are very, very skilled at it. There's a lot of fooling and clowning in Bristol, and some performers are just very, very skilled at putting an audience at ease, and some aren't. And I understand that fear, but I think as an audience it's okay to be scared. I think there's a lot of chat about plays that make people feel comfortable, or don't annoy an audience, or write a character that everyone's going to love, but actually that's not real life. And I think that it's okay to feel a bit angry or like a bit scared in a performance, as long as a performance isn't a whole attack. Like as long as it's got up and down, there's a bit of love in there as well. But I think it's okay to feel fear in a safe place.
It's definitely something I wanted to ask you, and it was kind of based on an experience I had. So when I first started directing, there'd been a writer's workshop, and this was all at the Mercury Theatre in Colchester. They'd done a writer's workshop, and then we came in and we performed each of the plays. Anyway, so we did this play, and it was about people in a park. Anyway, so it finished, and this guy came up to us and he said, that was really funny. I really enjoyed that. And we were like, fantastic. And then he said, I didn't write it like that. And we were like, oh, okay. I mean, he was very happy, but I think there's that kind of collaborative, even if you don't have the writer there, I think there's that collaborative thing where you read things in and you come to it with your own kind of vision, and you put your own time in, and all that kind of stuff. And I think, for actors, and directors, in a way, it's quite freeing not to have the writer there. It sounds like you are there. Is it fair to say you're doing some directing, or is it more like workshopping?
With Buzzing, I was there for the first week. Just so that, because I needed to do a bit of rewriting, because it needs some. I'm looking at doing research and development later in the year with it. It's not finished. But no, I was happy to hand over to the director. I think it was 5 weeks, and I just was there for a week, and then came in for a couple of days at the end. So if I was, I think it's good to be obviously involved, but it's also quite weird as a writer to, it's very exposing, as I'm sure you know, to write something that's all different parts of yourself, and then people all talking about it, and like as they're talking, I'm like, oh, sort of learning, like, oh, that's what that means, oh, that's interesting. And like as we're reading through the script, because obviously it takes quite a long time to write a script, so remembering where I was when I wrote different parts, it's quite an overwhelming sensory experience. And it's good to step away from that also.
And have there ever been times where you have not wanted to step away?
I mean, like Buzzing will go to I'll be working with a new team of people.
Okay.
At some point, either, I don't know when it's going to be, because theatres and COVID, but I wouldn't want to just completely let go of it now and see it on the stage.
Right.
Like, I'd want to be involved with a new team and see like how people are, where people are going with it. But then if we had a good relationship, I'd be happy to step away. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. And then in terms of writing, I mean, do you write, you think it's done, you approach some people, or do you kind of workshop stuff up? Because I've seen that process work quite well as well.
Well, when I was doing community theatre, it's all workshop really, and I was just like, because the purpose is other people's voices. I'd be like catching moments or getting a piece of improvisation, or and then writing it into a script. So that's how I've mainly written plays. Buzzing was and I've done quite a few short things over the last couple of years. That's quite different, and that's been solely writing. So it's a very different experience. And the one I'm doing at the moment, Fish Tank, I've been only writing. I'm looking forward to having some voices on it. I was in a writers group with the Royal Court, and some people read some of the script that I've written, but it does change when there's different voices reading. Yeah, definitely. And then I can hear it in a different way. I prefer to do a bit of writing and then workshop it, and then go like do it like that, like do a mix. But it's been a little tricky lately.
I think for me, I mean, I've never written a play, but having been an actor, I mean, I really enjoyed the whole collaboration thing, and that people bringing their own views to it. I'm reading a book at the moment called Creativity Inc. It's written by, I think his name is Ed Catmull. He basically helped set Pixar up, and it's really interesting what they were talking about, creating that kind of open, creative environment where you can have candor and you can be frank with each other without anybody getting defensive. Having said that, I've been in environments where some writers and directors or actors have been very precious, and you can't, no matter how constructive you're trying to be, you can't give them any criticism at all.
That's really tough.
Yeah. Have you ever come across that in your kind of process? And if you haven't, is it kind of an accident that you've been in that culturally collaborative space, or if you had to kind of do some work to kind of engender that?
I've been really lucky. I want to say lucky. Some people don't like the word lucky, but I think I've been lucky because I've been working with Grey Eye. So I've been really lucky in the fact that I haven't had to set everything up myself.
Sorry, what's Grey Eye?
Grey Eye Theatre.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I haven't had to go and find actors or actresses. Like they've done that. And they've got a really good network of people. I mean, there has been someone who wasn't particularly into the part that they had. And I didn't have to deal with that. The director dealt with it really well, and they were just like, well, just do what you're comfortable with. Luckily, it wasn't for a full-blown show, it was for an extract. Because otherwise, genuinely, we would have had to get someone else, because they weren't into the sort of belief system around the play, and you can't that wouldn't really work on a long time. If you're going to spend a lot of time doing it, that wouldn't really work. But yeah, I've been really lucky to be mainly working with professionals. So and I made a choice. I've worked in community theatre for such a long time, and I've loved it. Like it's been a job I've wanted to do. But and I still do it in some capacity.
Okay.
But it's hard. It's, you know, like as a theatre facilitator, you're the facilitator, the director, the writer, like everything. And then you have to, you know, talk to the production team, do prop making, or make the props, or like depending if there's a budget, like, you know, like you have to, like, it's absolutely everything. And so I made a choice after doing the MA, like that if I was going to progress in my own with my own voice, in my own way, it would be with support, with a functioning team who would, so because I think there's a real pattern in the arts of people disregarding mental health, and you know, the show must go on, and you can work harder, and you know, and I think that I don't know, I'm 47 now, and I'm just not into that. I want to work I want to work in a team of people. I want to have support. I want to do collaboration. I want to have, you know, I want to go into a space and work with people. So yeah.
And I think you from what you were saying about, you know, you write from, you know, deep inside yourself. I think you need, as you say, that kind of safe space as well. But what do you think community theatre brings to the table that, I don't know what to call it, professional or mainstream theatre doesn't?
Well, I think a lot of it is about process for the performers. And I mean, that's what I was interested in. That's what keeps me engaged in that, is seeing the journey of someone who maybe hasn't ever spoken about a subject and is able to open up, and like, it's it's genuinely, I know it sounds a bit cliche, but it is genuinely life-changing for people. And it feels like a real privilege to be part of that, and see and create a safe space where people can share and connect. And quite often in a group, you know, people make real connections and make friends where they've been maybe quite isolated. So I love that. And I think, you know, they're real stories, and they're not always, I mean, some community theatre is very professionally put on, but quite often, because budgets are so low, it's not comparable to a professional theatre, and it can't be, because you haven't got the team and the money behind it all the time. But you know, sometimes it's just a real beautiful thing to see real people tell real stories of connection and their lives. I really like that.
And I think what you were saying is that thing about being seen. And I think even geographically that changes as well. So, you know, I don't know, the experience of a black person in Leicester might be very different from, you know, a black person living in Bristol. What's so something you were saying about low budgets, though, it's incredible. I find it constantly, I'm constantly impressed about how the audience will suspend their disbelief. So I think I saw, it was called Burning Blue. I think it got made into a film, and I think most of that play was done under 3 spotlights when I saw it. I think it was at the National, just 3 spotlights. But do you find as a writer that you need to minimize the number of locations in a play?
I'm not a particularly location-based kind of person.
Right. Okay.
So I like quite a stark stage. But so I tend to like performers to create things physically rather than scene makers or prop makers to create it tangibly. You see what I mean? So and I'm not massively into naturalistic stories. Like I quite like magical realism. So I mean, I tend to have a mix of the two going through what I've been writing over the last couple of years. So there tends to be quite a lot of real, and then I'll go into complete fantasy. So and I think that's the magic of theatre.
And I mean, I've seen loads of pictures of you in very...
I'm scared of what you're going to say now, Stuart. What have you seen?
It's all on the internet. You can't get away from it now. But,
I know.
But in quite sort of confrontational, avant-garde sort of stuff. So, your writing seems very like challenging. It's not just, like you say, sitting there and being passive. It's putting you through an emotional, not through the ringer. I don't know. Do you put people through the ringer?
Sometimes.
Yeah. And what is the purpose of that? What do you think you get out of putting somebody through the ringer or making them feel uncomfortable?
I genuinely think sometimes it's a relief to see uncomfortable feelings on the stage. You're talking about performances I did with Dada for Girls, which was a kind of punk, avant-garde, in-your-face feminist group of 7 women. And it was a time in my life that will never be recreated. Everyone was on the edge of their lives in some way, and it was so powerful. It was amazing, and we all did our own performances, but then also did group performances, and it was like really challenging. In fact, I think we won the Wandsworth Fringe and Gothenburg Fringe. Both times we won a prize or something or other for being the most innovative, in your face, challenging performance. So pioneering, all those kind of words. But I think I know for myself, sometimes my mental health's not that great. Sometimes I feel really depressed. Sometimes I get really, really anxious. And what goes on in my head in those times can feel really isolating. And I think that being able to see things like that on stage that aren't really necessarily spoken about, and with Dada for Girls, the pieces that I did were generally around motherhood. And I've been a pretty, I would say, well, by my standards, a pretty mainstream mother. But like it's quite hard, like, as a person, to be put in a box by society and be expected to deliver a role 24/7 all the time, of being like, quite oppressed, really. And the performances I did were I guess the darkest moments that I felt around that. And I know for myself, when I've seen things like that performed or I've read them, it's a relief to know that I'm not alone. So it's not, I know it's not an attack on an audience. It's an opportunity for someone to feel connection, or there'll be people in the audience who are just relieved they don't have to say that themselves, because they can just, it changes in your body, I think, when there's something that you haven't spoken about, and you witness it in a safe space.
Now that's really interesting, because I definitely think that it's one thing watching it on a screen. It's another thing watching it when people are 20 feet away from you, or even 30, 40 feet away from you. I went to see a play. I cannot remember where it was. I know it was in London. It was called Feston. And it was Paul Nicholas used to be in EastEnders. And the whole play was basically pretty much people sitting at a table eating. And it becomes very clear that he's been abused by somebody else at the table.
Oh, I've heard about this. I haven't seen it, but I've heard about this.
Right. And it all comes to a head. And I physically had to stop myself from getting up, running onto the stage and trying to save him from another character. That never would have happened if I had been watching it on TV or watching a movie. And I definitely think there's that opportunity, as as I was saying, like, it's very different when you're in the same room as these people and seeing what they're going through.
Yeah, well, I hadn't heard of Sarah Kane before last year, but I saw it was on Zoom, but I know it would be different in the theatre. But I was affected by that, even though I was watching that through a screen, just through the power of the writing and the performance. And because it felt like what was going on in my head. I felt
Okay.
like it was just so, it was really dark, and it was really challenging, but and some people hated it, which I understand, because it's quite disjointed, it's quite poetic, but I really love poetry, and I love not always, but I kind of like theatre sometimes that isn't just very obvious. So it's a bit like those what they call those seeing eye pictures, you know, you have to sort of like go like that, and then the picture comes, you know what I mean?
Those, I can't do those, but
yeah. But well, I sort of felt like it was like that, and sometimes I really like that. So like your Gecko are really good at that. Before, like doing a performance and like talking with your body, so there's a lot of non-verbal stuff going on as well, and then like suddenly you feel the emotion, or you get it. I really like that.
And I think as well, to be able to see like an ensemble thing, like, because your eyes can wander, and sometimes, you know, you see another character reacting in a way that you probably wouldn't see them on in a movie, because there'll be a tight shot and somebody speaking, but you know, somebody else is doing something and you think, oh, okay, like they might not be speaking, but the way they're working. I wanted to come back to something you were saying. So the first episode of this podcast was about emotional resilience. Now, if you are writing something particularly dark, and you were saying, you know, obviously, you know, you have encountered some mental health issues, do you find when you're alone and you're writing, do you find it, what's the risk to you of writing yourself deeper into those feelings rather than writing out of them?
I think it's really good to be aware of. I think it takes practice. I had a mentor not last year when I was working with Grey Eye, Toby Holtz, and when I first found out he was my mentor, I was quite cross about it, like because we're so different, and we're so like, he writes for family shows, he really likes Shakespeare, he's like, you know, he's white, he's a middle-aged bloke, and I was just like, that's totally not what I wanted. But he was fabulous at helping me work that out. Whereas I would tend to go dark, then darker, and he's really good at finding things funny, not in a dismissive way, but seeing the humor in something. And I basically spent a year looking at that and really looking at the light and dark in something, and thinking about the journey of an audience, or the journey of my character, and like, what was the purpose of keeping someone in a dark place? Like, you know, like you can write very from an emotional place, but actually when you're structuring a play, or when you're getting into structuring anything, or you know, a long form thing, you have to be able to see the emotional journey. Like, it can't be a flat line. So I mean, you know, you write novels, but like, you know, so I think it really helped having doing a long form piece, because my play's an hour and a half, I think. And the play I'm writing currently will be that long. I think there can be a danger for me in short form. But then, is it a danger if it's short form? I don't know. I just got much more awareness about it now, and much more awareness about what is the purpose of it. And that's come through practice and seeing how people are affected. And it's a fine balance, because as I've been challenged with, you know, where's the light in here, or where's the sort of mainstream structure within it, as I'm sort of venturing out and talking to more theatres or people, it's like, how does that fit in a recognised structure? I still feel quite protective about the darkest parts, because I think it's important to not sanitize my experience, or the experience of my characters. And sometimes I just need a break. from the people. And like my mentor was so good at doing this. Like if I got stuck, if it's a genuine being stuck in an emotion, sort of being like, well, put them in a different place, give them a different age, like send them on holiday, ask them what the secrets are, like, or how would they be when they were 6 or 102, or where do they want to be, and just step out of what the actual plot is, and ask them, talk to them in different places, or maybe just like physically go out and have a swim. I think sometimes being a writer, I ran writing groups for a while before COVID, and I really encourage people to get up and move around if they wanted to. I think there's a belief that when you're writing, you've got to sit still all the time, and I'm not into that.
So also you talk about sort of light and dark. I think the audience needs that as well, because we talked about putting people through the ringer. They need that moment of kind of respite, and that respite shouldn't only be the interval.
I think it's nice. The more I'm writing, the more I'm able to bring humor. So to and to recognize where some light relief and vulnerability, like I'm getting better at allowing my characters to be vulnerable, and I didn't fully understand that until I went and saw Trainspotting was done as a play, and in Bristol it lasted forever. And like the performers were really great, and like the setting was really good, but they'd taken all the darkest and really in your face parts of Trainspotting and done that. And it was really, like the pregnant woman getting kicked in the stomach and then shit going everywhere. And it was just like the dark. And I watched that and I was like, oh yeah, I'm not feeling anything. I've just become desensitized. It's just, I'm not feeling anything. And that made me really understand why you need to pace, because if you want people to feel something, you need to give them space to be able to feel and breathe.
Have you ever walked out of a play?
I have. I'm trying to think of which one that I know I have. It's very rare for me to do it. But I remember there's one I saw which was like basically someone had built a womb and they were just rolling around in it for ages, and I'd gone with my partner at the time, and afterwards we'd both said, we thought the other one might like it, and then it was like, did you like it? And I was like, no, I wanted a pint about 10 minutes in. And it's like it was just like, sometimes those performances are great, and sometimes I'm just really not in the mood for watching someone rolling around the womb, like, I'd rather have a pint.
Do you know what I was in and it is interesting, like we're saying about how different audiences react. One thing I will never ever forget, the power of someone's imagination. So I was directing a play. It was called Sunshine, and it's about a girl who works in a porn booth, and it starts with her in the porn booth, and the guys put the money in the whatever, and the screen comes up and she's taken her clothes off and all that kind of thing, and that lasts 5 minutes tops. And then the rest of the show is, I think she's in her apartment and this guy visits her, and it's very deep and meaningful, and they kind of start to form a relationship. And then at the very end, it's bookended with another section of her in the glass booth. Anyway, the first thing comes up, and the actress was very, very vulnerable and nervous, and she had some history of abuse, and she did not want to take her clothes off. And I was like, that's absolutely fine. So we took the lights down. So she went to unhook her bra, brought the lights down, and the rest of the dialogue was done in the dark. And then when the lights came back up, she's doing her bra back up. Anyway, this couple, a couple of minutes after the lights went down, they got up and walked out.
Oh, why? Oh,
I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, they came back at the end, and I could see them like talking to other people, and then they looked at me and they came over to me and they said, your play is disgusting. And I said, well, I didn't write it. I said, what's the problem? And they went, you know, that really explicit sex scene and all that kind of stuff. And I said, well,
Oh, wow.
what did you actually see? And they were like, well, I said, because no one did anything. You didn't see anybody doing anything, and the dialogue wasn't that filthy. So, and it sort of dawned on them that it was all in their minds. So I do find it interesting when people will get up and walk out on what their reasons are and how powerful a blackout can be.
Yeah, and you just don't have any control about what people's triggers are, do you?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
In Buzzing, like the sort of the play works towards someone throwing a brick at someone else, which is obviously quite a violent act, but you don't see it.
Right.
Like but the feedback I had from some people was that was so violent and awful that they couldn't, you know, I should take that out.
Right.
But it wasn't, it's only spoken about. It's not in a similar sort of way. It wasn't, it's, you know, you don't actually see someone like throwing a brick, but yeah, so it's like you, and like other people are like, you know, you don't know what's affecting people, do you? That's why I find it really difficult when people say, you know, you need to write a character that people like, or you have to be gentle with audiences, because like, I mean, I've obviously worked with groups for years and have been mindful of this stuff for a really long time, but I can run sessions and someone can get really upset about talking about birthdays or cake. You know, if that's got a really, like, you just don't know what can be a trigger for someone. And like, I think, so that I do think it's important to actually be authentic and speak about an experience rather than try and protect an audience. I do.
Yeah. You were saying earlier about academia, and not that you didn't want to be taught stuff, but you know, it wasn't that passive. Yet you did mention structure. So I did want to ask you, so when you sit down to write, I mean, how much planning do you do before you sit down?
I could talk for a really long time about this.
Okay.
I used to be, when doing the MA, I was really angry about having about any structure at all, and I remember like going like, I don't agree with this, and trying to find a way around to trying to find something that really didn't have any structure, and like and really and getting to a point after a significantly long amount of time of having to concede and go, oh no, actually there is a structure to most stories, like, you know, 99% of them. And the last play I wrote, I made it really difficult for myself, and I didn't really plan it. I started with a monologue and then I went off, and it's like how it's ended up is like people respond very well to it because the structure isn't obvious. But I have laid a structure. I have like how, if you like, put the play up like that and then put a traditional structure behind and sort of a scene where it makes sense to me. And even though if it might be like off a little bit, there is a structure there that's quite complex. But I've been doing some radio writing recently with 4 other writers with Naked Productions and Grey Eye, and that, because it's 5 writers all together and we're each writing an episode of whatever a thing, the structure behind that is absolutely done to the nth degree, so everybody knows what character does what, how the dynamics change, what happens here, what lands in this scene, and that has made it infinitely easier to write. Like so much. So the play I'm writing now, I know the characters, I know what's happening, I've got quite a reasonable idea of the plot, and I am going to be doing this, I am going to be writing out the treatment, the structure to a really like extensive degree, so that I know when I come to it, I know that when I write the scenes, it just makes it so much easier. But I think that's because I feel more confident as a writer now, whereas I think if I mean, I don't know, I just naturally try and push boundaries on established things, I guess. But I think maybe if I'd done that, come to a structure first, I wouldn't have been able to find my voice within that.
Yeah. And I think this is where I'm training to be a book coach at the moment, and it's really interesting. So, I'm very big on structure and plotting and getting everything planned. So as I go in scene by scene, I know where their head is at. Going into the scene, I know what needs to change. I know what's coming out. I say that now. I didn't used to really think about what was going on inside the character. And for me, I think plotting is a series of events now, as I've been doing my training. What has changed is I now realize, yes, it's a series of events, but there's that second tier in that, okay, this event happens. What does that actually mean to the character? And I think that's easier. Do you think that's easier to do in playwriting than it might be for me to write in a novel?
I haven't written a novel, and so I can't answer that.
Right. Okay.
But and I sort of also question the word easier, because I think everyone works in such different ways. Some forms are just work better for your brain,
right,
depending on how you individually process things. But I guess I find writing a play, for me, I find I haven't got space to write a novel now because it needs so much holding. Not that playwriting doesn't, but I feel like it's more of a collaboration as a play. Yes. So like obviously you can write a script and then you go, and if you're really lucky, you have performers that you then could bring stuff, and then you can change it. Whereas a novel, when it's out and it's printed, that's kind of done, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm thinking of a self-published author, and I have been tempted. So, I've saw a comment on my latest book, and I thought, I could go back and just tweak that. And I'm like, no, don't. Like, you've got other things to get on and do. Coming back to playwriting, though, when we like talking about novels, I think it's possible to write a novel that is just a load of events. I think it's very possible to write a screenplay that is just a string of events. Particularly if you're looking at James Bond as a character, he doesn't really change. As a playwright, do you think it's possible to get away from character? I think the whole thing is always about character.
Do I think that you can write a play that isn't character focused? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I think it is possible to write to do that and to sort of present a series of events, if you like, and the audience will find a story.
Okay. Yeah.
Like you're saying, the strength of people's imaginations.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure as a theatre person, you've done many workshops where you do things like walk on the stage and pick up a chair and put it back down in a different place. Yeah. And the audience are like, oh, I know what you're thinking and feeling. Oh, like you were late. Oh my God, you've just broken up with someone. Oh, I bet he was hungry, or like whatever. And it's like, so yeah, I think that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
And an audience like, and I mean I do that with, if I watch dance, and I'm sure that like the person dancing has got their own internal thing, but there's not necessarily a story that goes with dance. But if I'm watching a dancer, I have a story in my head,
right?
I
saw a wonderful dance show. It was called Play Without Words, and it was so cleverly done. It was two characters, but they were played by 4 different people, and it was about a couple falling in love. And so there were 4 pairs, and depending on which couple you watch, the story played out differently as it went on. But coming back to, I've got a story, and I know I'm meant to be interviewing you, and I'm sorry about this.
No, but I like having a conversation.
I was in a play, and my sister dies at the end. I think it was Matilda Lie by Debbie, is it? And she dies at the end of the play, And the way the set was built is her bedroom was at the top, and I had to go up a ramp to get to her bedroom. Anyway, so I have found out that she has died, and the idea was that I go up into her bedroom and I have my kind of last line of dialogue. Anyway, so I get up into the bedroom and the light doesn't come on. I'm like, you know what am I going to do? I need to find a light. So I go back down the ramp, find a light that's halfway down the ramp, sit there, and I do my last line. Well, this woman came up to me in the bar afterwards and she said, that was just magnificent, the way you sat down and did that scene. And she's like, where is the director? So I've got the director over and she's like waxing lyrical. I didn't have the heart to tell her. I only sat there because the light didn't come on. But it is like you're saying.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, you know, we seek meaning. And there's that wonderful experiment, isn't there, about I can't remember who did it, it's driving me nuts, where they take a bit of film of an actor's face for like 30 seconds, and then they put a different image just before it, and then have the shot, and then they ask the audience, what is this character feeling? And then they do it again, but with a different image before the shot of his face, and the audience, you know, which of your plays have been most misunderstood?
I don't know about misunderstood, because I quite like deliberately writing in some things that are a bit not confusing, but like leading people down a double path, if you like, so that there's a choice. You like, because I kind of like the idea that when someone reads something of mine or sees something of mine, that they could have a conversation with the person that they've experienced it with, and have a discussion about a different outcome.
Okay.
So I quite often, when I write, deliberately do that. Yeah, so that there can be differences of opinion, and I know what my preferred outcome is.
Yeah.
But like I kind of almost am being deliberately provocative about prejudice.
Okay.
And so that because, you know, why write a play? I kind of want people to experience something and have a conversation.
Yes.
And learn. That's exciting to me. Yeah. I would much rather someone, like, say, like a group of 4 people came to see something or heard something on the radio of mine. I'd much rather they be like, no, it was this, no, it was this, no, it was shit, no, it was brilliant, than them all coming out going, oh, I had a nice night, you know. Yeah. It's like, but I had something on the radio last year, it's called Red Flags. And then I was and that was part of Naked Productions. There was 4 other writers, and everyone did different episodes, but my episode was Red Flags.
Okay.
And that can produce quite different responses from people. And I was interviewed for a local radio station about it, and the guy on the radio station was getting quite frustrated because he just wanted me to tell him the answer of what it was about. And I was just like, what do you think? And he was like, well, it's this. And I was like, okay. And he was like, he's like, I was like, I'm not going to tell you what the answer is, like, because it was a piece about a couple, a man and a woman, and their marriage had come to an end, and she was kind of talking about him being a bit abusive. Okay. And but the way I did it was like, she was recounting conversations where she'd been accused of being mad, and like, I kind of like the idea that you could come away from that thinking she is actually mad, or you could think that like he was actually abusive, but I don't give the answer. Okay. And I just think it's really interesting to see, because I think I've laid it out pretty equally. Yeah. And I just find it interesting to see where people sit with that after they've listened to it.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I think as well with playwriting, not that I've ever written one, but there is all those different levels of interpretation. So you've got the playwright, you know, what you mean, then the director, and then the actors, and then the audience. And to see how things change from what I might think when I read a script to when I actually see the production. I mean, they can be poles apart.
Yeah, and I do think that different performers bring a different essence as well. And that can change how an audience receives a character quite a lot.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, I could talk to you all day about this because you're bringing up many happy memories for me.
Oh, nice. Oh, mate. Well, we'll be able to travel soon enough, won't we? Maybe we should do that in real life.
Yes, but for now, I know obviously, I think theatres are starting to open up. What's coming up for you, and is there anything that people can kind of watch online?
I'm working on Night of the Living Flat Packs, which is going out on radio. I'm not supposed. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that.
Okay, don't worry.
Anyway, that I won't say anything more about it.
Okay.
And I'm working on Fish Tank with Sphinx Theatre, and that's gonna. I haven't got a proper date because we're not people aren't sure when theatres are actually going to come back.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's supposed to be at the end of the year. Keep a look on Twitter. I put stuff on Twitter.
Brilliant. So that's loud_word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. I recently started stalking you on Twitter. And okay, so what was the best piece of advice anybody ever gave you about playwriting?
Oh, I can think of lots, but I think I went to a workshop with B. Roberts. I really like her work. And she said, think of the biggest, most impossible thing that you'd like to happen that would make you really happy if it happened in your play, and make sure you have a bit of that in there.
Brilliant. That's great. And then what?
Nice, isn't it?
And it might be the same piece of advice, but what either advice or encouragement would you give to somebody who's kind of thinking about getting into playwriting or just starting out?
I would say go and see a lot of theatre. I think that it's really easy to want to do something and think you're pioneering and you're on your own. Yeah. But I think it's the world is a much happier place with connection.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Wise words. Thank you so much, Anita. It's been lovely. Well, I'd say to have a catch up, but yeah, I'm so proud of the way your career's growing and developing, and I actually haven't seen any of your plays, so I'm going to come and see something.
No, well, next time it's possible in real life, I'll let you know.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you again.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye.